Today we're doing another AniLysis, and this one is on something very interesting. It's on the ant morph. So ants come into play a few times in this series, but we're specifically looking at the morph, the ant morph. And as we can see from this book here, it was on one of the covers. I believe that's actually a red ant when it should be a black ant, but there you go. So on the Revelation, it's Marco morphing the ant, but most of the ant morph stuff comes from this book here, which is book 5, The Predator. So they have to get into Chapman's house because they're trying to get a transponder so that Axe can talk to his home world. And Chapman's office is the only place they can think of to get this particular item. So they want to go in there. How do they do that? Well, they find out that there are ants that go into the wall around Chapman's office. So they think, good idea, let's use ants to get inside. Ants, that was Cassie's brilliant idea. Ants. See, ants could easily get into Chapman's basement, and ants could carry away the small transponder. Ants. This was what my life had come to. We ended up spending a couple of hours debating whether we should be red ants or black ants. I finally left in disgust. I didn't want to be an ant, red, black, or any other colour. So the animals came to this decision, but they needed to know whether they were going to choose black ants or red ants, and we quickly got an answer. The answer is black. Turns out most of the ants near Chapman's house are black. Tobias checked it out. So they wanted to acquire black ants to get into Chapman's house because they thought, well, there are black ants there, so we should be alright going in as black ants. The big problem, and this is where they should have known a bit better, or at least Cassie should have, as she explains later on. Or they should have done their research. Ants are very aggressive towards ants of a different group. Where did they get these ants from? Did they get them from Chapman's house? No. We had already acquired some ants earlier, at Cassie's barn. So there's the first major problem. They got ants from a colony in or around Cassie's barn, which is quite far away from Chapman, so they're not the right ants. Okay? So they go to Chapman's place, and they want to get in, so they start morphing. Let's have a look at the description of the first time one of the animals goes into ant morph. And by the way, every animal apart from Tobias goes into the ant morph. So Jake, Rachel, Marco, Cassie and Axe, they are the only characters who morph ants because Tobias can't morph at this point. Just so we know, just so we're clear on that. So let's have a look at the description of the ant morph. I concentrated hard on the ant I'd acquired earlier. The morph began very quickly. Falling. That was the first sensation. I was shrinking rapidly. The ground was rushing up at me. It was like one of those nightmares where you're falling and falling but never seem to hit the ground. I was still maybe half a metre tall when my skin seemed to turn crisp, as if it had been burnt. It became hard, harder than fingernails and glossy black. I looked over at Cassie and nearly screamed. She was farther along than me. Only 30 centimetres tall and hard-shelled black all over, glistening, rigid, plastic-looking skin. Her legs were shrivelling rapidly, so were her arms, although they had become longer to match her legs. The third set of legs was growing out of her chest. And her face was no longer human. Her head was turning sort of teardrop-shaped. Wickedly curved mandibles were growing out of her mouth, huge, slashing, deadly-looking serrated jaws. Her eyes had gone flat and dead, just black dots. Antennae, looking almost like another set of legs, sprouted from her forehead. Her waist had pinched tight. Her lower body swelled till it looked like it was as big as a watermelon. Seems like a pretty horrific experience for all those involved. And we're still at the point in this series where Marco doesn't really know if he wants to join in or not, because this is the book where he eventually, spoiler alert, finds his mother is part of the force and he's well and truly dragged into the fight. At this point, he's still sort of umming and ahhing over it. And this experience didn't go down too well with him. But why didn't it go down too well with him? Well, we've seen how bad the morphing process was. What are the ants' instincts and what's it operate like as a morph? My antennae were smelling. I was looking for a scent. Several scents. It was not like human smell. Not like Jake had described dog scent when he had morphed his dog Homer. That kind of scent is full of possibilities and subtleties. This was different. I was looking for just a few scents, just a few smells. The ant's mind erupted inside my own. There was no fear, none. There was no hunger, there was no self, no me. My antennae swept the air. Strange. not home, not the colony. Enemy territory. Smell them. Smell their droppings. Smell the acrid odours they smeared along the ground to mark their boundaries. Guys? Cassie's voice in my head. If you try, you can kind of use these ant eyes. A little, anyway. If you concentrate, you can notice light and dark. It's like watching a really, really bad black and white TV that's almost all snow, and you can only see what's right in front of you, but you can almost see a picture. Everybody says ants are incredibly strong for their size, Cassie pointed out. Let's see if that's true. It seemed impossible, but Cassie, Rachel and Axe managed to lift that monstrous load off the ground. I mean, it was like seeing 3 people walking down the street carrying a city bus. That's how big it was. But it's true what they say about ants. For their size, they are some strong little bugs. Everyone pretty much knows these sorts of things about ants. They're very much a unit of a hive, so they haven't really got much thought of their own. They're heavily guided by scent, as Marco explained there, but also they can lift massive weights compared to their own body. You've seen the pictures of ants with massive leaves carrying them around places. There was a natural history museum display many years ago when I went there, I think my first time, and they just had this massive box with a big ant colony, and it was brilliant. You just saw them all marching along these sticks and branches, carrying things. It was great. I loved it. I wish I could have seen that again. Maybe someday in the near future. It's a fun little sight. Probably not as fun to be one of them. And certainly because the ants are of a hive mind and they haven't really got any sense of self, the Animorphs lost themselves in this morph, and I believe this was near enough the first time where they almost got completely lost in it. It's only because Tobias couldn't morph. It's actually a good thing at this point. Because he couldn't morph, he was still himself, and he saw that the animals were losing their control, and he starts shouting at them and brings them back. Suddenly, I realised that there had been something, a sound. Yes, not a smell, not a feel. You are humans. You are humans. Listen to me. You are not ants. Fight it. Fight it. Yes, not a smell or a feel. In my head. Me. Marco. I screamed inside my own head. Tobias said later that it scared him half to death. He thought I was being killed. What kind of creatures are these? It was Axe. He sounded terrified. They have no self. I was lost. There was nothing to hold on to. They are not whole. They are only parts, like cells. Just pieces. What kind of foul creatures are these? Hive, Cassie said, sounding shattered. They are social insects, part of a colony, a hive. I should have guessed. I should have known. Axe is right. Each of us is only a part, like a single cell within a human body. And then things go somewhat tits up in this plan. They do get the transponder, and they bring it back through the ant tunnels where they're trying to go. And then suddenly there's an onrushing of ants, and all hell breaks loose. This is an awesome scene, by the way, and Book 5 is much better than that book, that's for sure. But Book 5 has some pretty damn awesome scenes throughout, and this is one of the best ones. So let's just have a look at a few select highlights from this big ant battle scene. It happened suddenly. There was no warning. 1 second the tunnel ahead of me was empty. The next second it was full of charging, racing army of ants. Enemies, my ant brain said. Now the killing would begin. The speed of the attack was incredible. The force of the attack was impossible to explain. There were hundreds of them, ahead, behind, flooding up from side tunnels, bursting from the walls. My leg! They bit off my leg! I could feel my waist being sawed through by grinding, sharp mandibles. A searing liquid was fired at me. Poison. They were stinging me again and again, and ripping me apart. Human. I wanted to be human again. Please, just let me live long enough to become human again. I couldn't breathe. Sand blocked the air. Pressure. Then the ground around me opened up. I swear it was like climbing up out of a grave. The air. Fresh, clean night air. I exploded up out of the sand. Jake was on top of me, pushing against me as he grew, and the others, who had only been inches away in the tunnel, also pressed together in a rapidly growing heap of misshapen bodies. I tried to squirm away, but it was awkward. I was only half human. But at last I lay there on the ground, staring up through human eyes at the stars. They escape this ordeal, but they learn a very important lesson. Ants are buggers. A month or so after the experience of the ants, I picked up a book about ants. The author said, if ants had nuclear weapons, they would probably end the world in a week. He was wrong. It wouldn't take them that long. This battle scene is pretty much the reason that ant morph was never quite used again. It was sort of suggested that in book 9, The Secret, but they quickly said, no way, and they decided to go termites instead. So I'm pretty certain, unless I'm forgetting, that was the only time the group morphed ants to complete a mission of sorts, because this episode was so gosh darn traumatic. And it was brutal. Excellent scene. But there was one other time, hence this being here, that the ant morph was sort of used. And I will say that this is probably the least justified book cover of the series, because we see Marco morphing ant, but what is the sole contribution of the ant morph to this book? Marco has taken his dad and told him everything. And just to prove it, he decides to start morphing. Oh God, Dad cried. Oh no! I was becoming an ant, but I wasn't going to wait for the ant's mind to surface. No, I began to demorph. I let Dad watch me in all the horror and weirdness of morphing. I let Dad sit there, alone and up close with his new reality, as I demorphed back to boy. And that's it, that's the only other time the ant morph came into play, and those 5 lines were enough to get it on the front cover of the Revelation. Fucking book. Crap enough as it is. So that is the ant morph. There are some other things in this series involving ants, but they're not technically an ant morph, so it's going to be in a separate AniLysis video further down the line. But somebody did suggest ants, so here it is. Here's the ant morph video, the AniLysis video. I hope you're enjoying this series, by the way. There is going to be a lot of these. If you haven't already been able to tell, I am going to cover everything. I'm now going to be doing every single morph, as well as every single minor character, alien race, freaking locations, buildings, everything. It's all going to be here on this channel. This particular AniLysis series is probably going to go on for, I'd say, at least 300 videos. How many items, locations, people, places, morphs are in this series? It's all going to get covered. All of it. So if you want to find out more about animals, if you want to be an animals expert, this is the place to be. So come back next time, where we're going to be talking about a girl from this book. And no, it's not Rachel. It's Jessica. So tune in for the next AniLysis. I'll see you then. Ta-ra.